Barney Hurwitz, president of the congregation, assessed everybody individually. He knew to twopence halfpenny what everybody was worth at the time. He said, Fred, had to be £5,000. Charlie, 2,000. When he came round to me, he said, I'll take a cup of tea at your house. He said, I want £100 from you. I was a minor civil servant in those days before becoming a minor academic. And he explained to me in simple words how this £100 could be financed, and in due course it was paid. And that's how we built Belfast Synagogue.
Early morning each weekday in Belfast. The ritual instructions are clear. They shall be as a sign upon your heart and head. The straps signify wedding rings, a marriage ceremony with God. And these straps should be a little too tight, just to show that the love of God can be painful. This is the minyan, which requires a minimum of 10 just men. And why 10? The divine presence dwells in the midst of community, and 10 is believed to be the minimum number which can represent a community. Those who wish to say the Kaddish, a prayer for relations who have died, may now do so. The Kaddish can only be said in the midst of a minyan. And the Torah is taken from the Ark, the laws of Moses, contained in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Talmudic scholars interpret the laws. They can pronounce on the Lebanon of today or the Arabia of 5,000 years ago. They will argue among themselves. At its height, just after the Second World War, the community numbered between 1,500 and 2,000 people. Today, there are just over 300. In common with their Protestant and Roman Catholic counterparts, many young professionals have emigrated. Others have left this strictly Orthodox community to marry non-Jews. And of course, the troubles haven't helped. There have been fewer business opportunities and fewer prospective marriage partners. There are very few young men in this minyan, and no women. Women may not participate in a minyan. Only 10 just men. And why just men? Is it the male-dominated society it appears to be?
Well, I suppose in many ways it is, because the husband and father has historically had the final word in family affairs and participates so much more fully in synagogue services and decisions in the community. But the wife and mother, I think, in a Jewish family has a very, very particular role to play. And her influence, if properly used, can be of tremendous benefit to the family and to the community at large.
Do you think that women have equal status with men in Jewish society?
Yes, perhaps even more so if one takes in individual acts the woman's role in her home and in her community. She has tremendous, as I said, tremendous influence to bear. She is responsible for the kashrus of her home, which is, of course, the tenet of our religion.
Kashrus?
The separation of meat and milk, of eating only purely supervised foods, not eating of the forbidden foods. She has the responsibility of educating her children. It's her responsibility. She has the responsibility to see that her home is well ordered and that her husband has time to attend not only to his material work but to his learning and attendance at synagogue.
You shall not boil a kid in the milk of its mother. So saith the Torah 3 times. Therefore, meat and milk products must be kept strictly separate. Only meat from cud-chewing animals is permitted, and the animal must have been killed according to ritual slaughter laws. This ensures that the meat is almost bloodless. There are 2 separate sets of plates and cutlery. Only fish with fins and scales may be eaten.
Today is Friday, and in a few hours the Sabbath will commence at sundown. In accordance with law, everything has been prepared in advance. As you can see, the table has been set with a pure white cloth, the nicest of cutlery and glassware to honour the Sabbath into our home. The first act is the lighting of the Sabbath candles, which is done by the housewife. This, of course, is a supreme honour which she has been given by the Almighty, as she is the one who ushers in this holy day into our home. When her husband will return from synagogue, he will sing songs of praise to the Sabbath and welcome it into his home. Then he will recite a hymn in honour of his wife called Eishes Chayil. This is recited every Friday night by husbands everywhere. After that, he will sanctify the Sabbath by pouring out wine into this goblet and reciting the Sabbath prayer. He then distributes from this goblet into the smaller ones the wine for his guests to partake of. After that, we go and wash our hands in a prescribed manner, not just in the everyday manner of washing hands, after which we must remain silent until the head of the household returns and makes the blessing over the 2 white loaves. There are 2 loaves on every table for every meal on the Sabbath and holy days. This is because when the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness, manna was provided sufficient for each day, and for the Sabbath and holy days a double portion was sent so that there would be no problem of searching or working for food on holy days and rest days. After that, the formalities are over and one sits and enjoys a relaxed atmosphere with friends and family. Fish is being served for the first course. This is customary in many homes, as we're also commanded to have fish and meat on Sabbath and festivals to elevate it from the ordinary meals of the week.
But there are fewer and fewer Orthodox Jews. As the community grows smaller, one wonders how much longer these Friday night observances will continue in Belfast.
Well, Harry, you've got to take it in the wider context. We're not unique, because with the possible exception of Manchester, there's a diminution of Jewish communities throughout the United Kingdom. You notice I haven't included London, because London is a massive conurbation. But when you take the provincial centres, with the exception of Manchester, there's been a definite contraction. And these statistics show that the general figures of the Jewish communities throughout these islands has contracted. It has contracted.
Have you yourself ever been tempted to go to Israel?
I have indeed. But the virtue of the fact that I have daughters, son-in-law, and 2 delightful granddaughters and mother living here, well, I have a very good reason to remain in Belfast. And really that is the motivation. And then I like the place, because after all, I was born here. I'm an Ulster man, and
That's what I
love
wanted to ask
place.
you. Are you an Ulster man who happens to be Jewish? Are you a Jew who happens to be an Ulsterman?
I think I must be a bit of both, because after all, I was born here, went to school here, lived here all my life, love the province, love everything about it, feel very much part of the local scene. And it's a wonderful thing to walk down Royal Avenue or Donegal and someone says, hello Harold, and hello Billy, hello Jack, hello Pat, hello Seamus, and I'm known to all and sundry, and I feel very much part of the scene, and I think I would miss it terribly if I had to go away from here. And even my son who lives in Melbourne says the same thing. He says, you know, once you're born here, he says, it's an indelible stamp. He says, it's with you all the time. He says, I still like, he says, soda bread, he says, and tatty bread. He says, a kosher Ulster fry, he says, is very acceptable. He says, and I've even trained my wife, he says, into making these sort of delicacies.
Some would say that leaving Northern Ireland for Israel is, well, out of the frying pan into another frying pan. Yet, many Belfast Jews have emigrated to this narrow strip of the Middle East at the far end of the Mediterranean. perhaps it's a young professional couple who decide to make their careers and to bring up their children in the Jewish homeland. Often they are followed by the grandparents who wish to be near their families. Netanya is a resort town 20 miles north of Tel Aviv. Meyer and Meyer again came here after spending all their working lives in Belfast.
I decided to come to Israel because, well, my children were here. Meyer and I had this little apartment, which we'd bought a few years before, and we loved the country, always have done. Let's face it, I'm a Jew, this is a Jewish country, and I'm at home here, and I feel at home.
When we first came to live here permanently, I found it very difficult. I didn't know where to shop. I didn't know what I was buying. But gradually I got used to it. And as the months wore on, I found it getting easier. The heat at the beginning was a bit much for me after living all my life in Northern Ireland. And I find I had to stay indoors a lot. And cooking with the strange produce was difficult for me. A housewife's life is similar, isn't it? No matter where she lives, she's still got to cook, she's still got to clean, she's still got to shop. Now I absolutely adore it. Prices here are much higher now than they were. When we first came to live here, I was really thrilled to know that I could buy just whatever I fancied. And it didn't bother me. But now I've got to think before I buy. And I've really, find things have got very much more expensive. The language, of course, is a big problem for me. I don't think I'll ever learn to speak Hebrew. I know the names for the vegetables and certain fruits, but when I try to string them all together, I get it all confused. There's always someone around that will help me, and with a sign here and a nod there, I manage. There are things I miss here, and when we're out in company, we all joke and say, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a nice middle-cut piece of plaice, or a dish of smoked salmon, or have you got a tin of salmon? I've got a tin of salmon, but I'm saving it for a special occasion. But we have to learn to live with the produce of the land.
I just feel normal here. I certainly feel no different to anybody else. Whereas perhaps if we go back to our school days, Harry, let's face it, we were the odd men out, weren't we? I miss the familiarity, I miss the accent, I miss knowing every street corner, every cinema, every theatre, every restaurant where you and I spent as boys. I love Northern Ireland. I love the people of Northern Ireland. I was born there, I was brought up there, I was educated there. I worked there all my life. But now at this time of my life I felt, well, it's time for a change, and where else will I go but to Israel?
Not surprisingly, with an annual inflation rate of 150%, the Gen's major worries appear to be economic. As in Northern Ireland, the direct effects of the Troubles tend to be felt by other people, elsewhere. But this is a divided country, a country at war, and the Jews themselves are divided. What comes as something of a surprise to the outsider is the strength of opposition to the Lebanon War and to the expansion of settlements on the occupied West Bank, only recently halted on economic grounds. Northern Ireland's problems are not the only ones which appear at times to be insoluble. In Jerusalem, we went to see a man with more than a passing interest in Ireland. Chaim Herzog is the president of Israel. He fought in the British Army in the Second World War and grew up in Dublin. He was born in Belfast.
I was born in a place called, this is according to my birth certificate, called Two Norman Villas, Cliftonville Road, off the Antrim Road.
Quite posh.
I don't know what it is now, I don't know what it was then, but I did go to look for it when I was stationed in the British Army in Northern Ireland in the World War. And very naturally I followed the events in Ireland today with a very considerable amount of of anguish. I